If you want to accomplish more, you can't be a big old wussy. You can't be a sissy. You can't be afraid. You've got to go forward with a clear and active plan. In today's episode, we're going to talk specifically about that. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. If you're a business owner, an executive, if you're responsible for other people's good well-being through their paychecks or your own financial well-being as a head of the household, then pay close attention. To get things done, we must hold people accountable. We must have a clear and active plan for implementation. We must address and qualify problems and find the root cause to move towards the outcome we desire. It's most important that you know what outcome you desire. So I do social experiments to test the implementation of historical strategies because I've been doing this for 23 years. I've had coaching clients, I've worked in high stakes environments, I've been in the trenches with techniques that I will recycle into the current economy using a social experiment to determine whether or not it's relevant. I'm going to share with you one of those social experiments, but I'm going to keep the discretion of the members quiet. So basically, what I've established is a small group of individuals that were previously pumping me for funds. So they reached out to me. I'm a permaculture design consultant. I write about food security, I write about sustainability, and these folks reached out. And it became very clear that these folks reaching out with for me were either desperate in their situation or otherwise trying to scam me. Now, I constantly get sweetheart scam contacts. I constantly get phishing emails. I constantly get a lot of different things because of the publicity related to the podcast, publicity related to the websites. And so folks will come out of the woodwork. So what I decided was to take this specific group of individuals who I could help with their solution. Because if they're really having food insecurity, if they're really having clean water issues and sanitation issues, those are things I can help them solve, not by giving them money, but by helping them with specific implementations. Again, it doesn't matter what this is. This could be a problem in your business where people keep coming to you and saying, we've got this problem, we need to solve it. It could be a problem in your industry you're solving for clients. It doesn't matter what it is. The key is you can do a social experiment around it to test ideas and concepts before you roll out. And ultimately, it doesn't have to be with the original group. It could be a proxy like what I've done here. Now, the key thing of helping these individuals is we have to define the problem. So these folks are in a country that most would consider a third world country. They're showing me pictures of orphans. They're showing me pictures of dirty water. They're showing me pictures of their life conditions and situation. The first thing I did was verify their location. I either used the metadata that's in the files they sent over, which, by the way, many of the files they sent over were actually just searched off the internet. They're stock files. But the ones that I got them to take locally, so I had them take a local picture, helped me determine through landmarks and a few other aspects whether they were really taking the picture. And then I used the GPS code from the image itself, found their location on a satellite, verified some information, and realized these people really are desperate. They're really in a bad situation. They don't have clean water, they don't have proper sanitation, and they've resorted to scamming because they are contacting hundreds of people on Facebook, scamming individuals for $5 or $10 here and there, and they're raising about $1,000 a month. But the money that they're raising is not being distributed to help local individuals. Now, 10 or 15 of these people, they start talking to each other. I end up with 20 or 30 of these people contacting me direct. So after I verified of that group which ones are actually in desperate, dire straits, because I redid this whole thing on each of the individuals who would participate. Um, I now am going to focus those resources on helping those individuals. So, what's the lesson here? Well, if there's problems in the marketplace, you want to validate those problems and determine whether it is the actual problem at hand, that problem statement, or is there some other root cause. Now, in this case, the root cause includes government regulations on the use of seeds or the actual holding of seeds. It is illegal where they're at to grow a plant, take the seeds from that plant, and transfer them to another party. or to trade them with other people. So if you've got a papaya seeds, for example, you can't just trade them for orange seeds from somebody else. There's licensing, there's weird things in their country. So we're looking at ways to get around it. Now, by the way, I'm not spending a full time job on this. I am very specific that we are going towards results. As I open this podcast episode, it is about the results, not about the activity. And so what we've done here is now I've identified the people who are legitimately having problems. And then using satellite technology, because I know their actual physical location, I contacted every NGO within a reasonable distance of their location. And in doing so, I engaged other people who could provide local solutions. Now, this comes from my hurricane marketing system, where we talk about how service providers can basically be heroes to their community after a major event and use that to build customer loyalty and build actual tangible results from a human perspective. And so what I'm doing is I'm finding the local market that has jerry cans, for example. I'm finding the local resources to get charcoal. I'm finding local resources to get sand. I'm doing the things these individuals cannot do because all they have is cell phones. They're using data networks or a shared Wi-Fi in the village in order to reach out on Facebook. And because they're reaching out, I'm willing to invest the time in those who are legitimately in need. And so we're finding them jerry cans, water containers. There was recently a flood in the area, so water filtration and sanitation is important. We're doing root cause analysis. I'm enrolling people to help these individuals. Nobody's getting paid, yet everybody's cooperating because, again, there's a shared mission. We're applying methodologies and technologies in a place that has no resources, which is essentially a proxy for a post natural disaster or post, for these people, it is the apocalypse because they literally have. See, here's the problem. There's people using bush toilets. That means people are literally crapping in the woods. And then when it rains, that washes into the boreholes, which is the only source of water for these villages. And so now they have human waste going into their only source of water. And then people drink the water and they end up with worms. They end up with illnesses. They end up with other things. Now, the individuals on the ground actually know this is a problem, but they don't have tools and solutions to solve it, or local regulations doesn't allow them to solve it. So what we're doing is we're interacting with these individuals who have legitimate needs, and we're doing baby steps to move them towards a solution. Now, the reason I took the individuals who were reaching out to me directly, and when word spreads, a lot of people contact. These people can not give me money for my time. So what I did is put them together in a group, and by putting them together in a group, I'm encouraging them to help each other. Now, it's not working very well because the mentality is demand and need. And that's what happens when customers in a marketplace are really struggling. They're going to try anything because they're desperate for a solution, but the more desperate they become for a solution, the less likely they'll work together because it becomes competitive for limited resources. And so we have to overcome that. And that's what we're working on right now, is helping the individuals see that while they each have nothing, they each have something. And this is a key principle in the strategic relations methodology. And if you want to sit down personally and talk about how this works in your environment, I can simply do that in a paid consultation or in some kind of discovery call. But let's get back to the main point. If we have 10 people in a group and each of them are equally poor, each of them are equally desperate, the probability of one of those individuals having a practical and useful solution that will alleviate the level of discomfort for the other people is very, very high. So let's say each of them have a discomfort between 1 and 10 for sanitation in their community. And some people have a 1 discomfort, which is a very low discomfort, and some of them have a 10 discomfort that's very high. If I go through as the facilitator or as a mediator for the group and I help them work out where they are on the scale, I can take the people who have the lowest amount of discomfort and have them share their practical best practices. Now, remember, all these folks are on the ground in the same community. They could be 20 kilometers from each other or 100 kilometers from each other, but I've concentrated this group And now somebody says, well, we use dry toilets in our village. We raise our toilets up high enough so when the floods come that we don't have any washout of the waste. And then we've made blocks of dry toilets where people can come in and use the bathroom, and that reduces the number of people who use bush toilets. Great. One person has an idea, which I then syndicate to the other 9 people, and now it's up to the other 9 people to adopt. But do you see what we're talking about here? Even though they're all equally poor, in the areas that matter of sanitation, food security, and clean water, they have varying degrees of discomfort. And we take those that have the least discomfort because they found practical solutions for their area, and we syndicate those ideas to the rest of the group. Now everybody moves on the gauge. So if they had a 10 discomfort in sanitation, now maybe they have an 8 discomfort in sanitation. See, the person who has no discomfort in sanitation doesn't lose. In fact, we position them as an expert, which opens up income opportunity. Now, in a country that has a failing currency, and a country that has hyperinflation, and a country that has limited resources, and even resources that are controlled by central authority, such as a tribal leader or a local government, they can still barter on the authority by training each other, expanding the knowledge that they have, then forming together a syndicate or group, a private benefit organization that then goes out and helps the next people. Now, one thing that was interesting in this environment is that when one neighbor gets clean water, other neighbors get jealous and physically come and take that clean water. So, what's the solution for that? Now, again, I'm trying to share with you practical examples in a worst case scenario. All of these methodologies work incredibly well when you're not in a worst case scenario. But in this case, when one neighbor has a low discomfort level with something, other neighbors find out and they will physically come and take those things. So one of the properties has fruits and vegetables, and they have a lot of things going on, and people will come and crap in their gardens on purpose because they're jealous of the fruits and vegetables. And I said, well, here's the solution. First off, you could get an AK-47, which evidently is something easy to do there, and you could defend your property. And that was the humorous kind of break the ice approach. Or you could teach the neighbors how to grow their own beautiful gardens, because that's evidently something you know how to do. If someone gets jealous of what you're doing, it is evidence that you know what you're doing and that you're doing it well. But to reduce the jealousy and get the cooperation, which is what strategic relationships is about, we've encouraged these individuals to go train their neighbors to exchange knowledge. They don't have money, they don't have food, they don't have clean water, they don't have sanitation, but they have some level of knowledge in an area of specialty or expertise, which they can exchange with their neighbor because the neighbor is doing this out of desperation, not out of malice. This malice or desperation, even if it does exist, can be softened by sharing ideas and concepts. Hey, I noticed you took a big, giant, steamy dump in my garden, and I'd like to offer you an opportunity to have your very own garden to let nice, big, steamy dumps in. Do you mind if we come over and have a conversation about this, and I help you build a garden? In fact, I'll even bring you some plants. See, when they realize that there is not competition, there is no competition anywhere, and that cooperation through mutually beneficial exchanges, which is free market, will often solve these problems. So now, instead of neighbors coming over and crapping in your garden, and this is a real example, by the way, folks. And I'm having these private conversations with individuals, and we're dealing with the psychology. They're embarrassed, they're concerned, they're afraid their neighbors are going to come take the harvest when it comes time to harvest. And I'm saying invite them over and then encourage them to grow their own. It's confusing for them. But the basis here is this: when that neighbor has a beautiful garden and experiences the same challenge of others being jealous, and then educates and reduces that jealousy, you start building a community, and that community creates a new normal. So, hey, why are you crapping in my garden when we have these nice, clean, dry toilets, which are creating fertilizer and biology in our environment so that we can all have beautiful and healthy gardens? These methods of strategic relations work in the business environment. They work in the cutthroat corporate environment. They work in the most competitive and tough environments. And through this social experiment, I'm demonstrating that they also work in areas that have mass poverty, that have mass problems. Now, the reason that I'm taking the time to implement these things is because I do really care about these individuals' well being, and I have a personal satisfaction in solving these problems. Now, it's fascinating in this environment how the individuals don't want to cooperate, even though they can literally walk to some of their neighbors. And when they do, they realize that cooperation versus competition, they realize mediums of exchange, they realize they're not as poor as they think they are. Ultimately, they realize that the money is not going to be the solution because the money has too many strings attached. See, the same jealousy, the same malice that happens with a neighbor crapping in someone's garden is what happens when individuals start becoming successful and the local government council is like, wait, where did you get all that money? And so I've actually seen a situation where there was a fundraiser set up, and I'm not giving these folks money. I'm not doing fundraisers, but there was a fundraiser set up, and the money never made it to the individuals because some local official came in and quote, I'm doing air quotes, quote, taxed the money. And so there's even a problem with NGOs coming into the area because the NGOs are getting taxed. They have to pay bribes, they have to pay funds to local individuals, and still not be able to deliver aid. So again, the only solution here is for the individuals to help themselves, and they help themselves by building stronger communities. They start building networks of information and resources. And then through the technology that's available today, because they literally have mobile phones. Now, I've talked to some of these folks on the telephone. We're talking over Facebook. They can talk over WhatsApp. But they are literally, you can hear in the background people screaming, and it's like a marketplace. They have to go to a marketplace to use Wi Fi, and then they only have 5 minutes. Folks, it doesn't matter what your situation is. These techniques and methodologies work. I've shared a few of them here. The key is that you build people up. You bring people together. You cultivate people. The money has no value. The relationships are everything. More importantly, how you apply those relationships to solve meaningful problems, that's priceless. So I hope I'm giving you useful information. And that's my goal with this podcast. In fact, this podcast has been a social experiment for many years now. I give you useful chunks and I monitor to see who actually uses them. And those are the people where I'll concentrate my interest. And then, of course, if you ask questions, I'll tailor my response to your questions. Overall, though, these techniques work in the marketplace to increase your earnings, decrease your value, to limit the opportunity, um, to limit the problem of getting laid off because you have new opportunities coming to you all the time, and to ultimately position you as an expert or an authority in a specific market. By doing these things, you gain greater influence, greater control over the outcomes, and then if there is an adverse situation, you have a skill set to overcome that adverse situation. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations, where we transform business relationships into profits. Those profits come in many forms, and ideally, these things will alleviate human suffering, increase personal freedoms, and drive forward greater opportunities for our children. If you're interested in that topic or you have questions, visit me at www.insidestrategicrelations.com. At that website, we have a free newsletter. We also have a contact page where you can ask your questions. And then again, I will answer those questions in the podcast. I don't care about the thousands of people who listen to this podcast and then listen to another podcast and then listen to one more podcast and they end up never taking any action. I care about the action takers, the individuals who have actual need in their home, in their community, in their business, who want to raise their hand and say, yes, I'm willing to work. And if you're willing to work, we have tools, resources, ideas, and concepts that once implemented will transform your existence through the relationships that you develop, through the people you meet, through the problems you solve. Now, listen to this podcast carefully one more time. I want you to have a notebook in front of you to take notes, to understand that you can structure people, You can challenge people. You can validate concerns and frustrations. And the last tip really is if you have your staff coming to you all the time and saying, what problems do I have? You want to look at grouping them up by their topic area and then figuring out who already has answers, syndicate those best practices, and then ask individuals to solve their own damn problem. I know that last part was probably a little rushed in there. I can go into more detail in another program. I can answer your question about it. But if folks are coming to you and they are not able to solve their own problems, and the reason they're coming to you is because they're reverse delegating, because they're jealous of your position, because they have expectations of you that are unreasonable, because they are not thinking, because they're weak. There are so many reasons why the simple challenge of, oh, well, tell me a little bit more about the problem. What do you think might be a great approach to solve this problem? And then ultimately, what kind of implementation can we do to test? That is what I've shared with you here in a practical example. That is what's going to help you get to the next level. That is what is going to help build people. By building people, we all benefit. I want to thank you for being a part of the Inside Strategic Relations podcast. I hope you're subscribed to the podcast. I hope you'll share it with your colleagues and your peers. And I really hope if you have any questions that you don't leave this podcast with those questions churning in your head. In fact, even if you wake up in the middle of the night sweating, worrying about a problem, I want you to feel comfortable that you can visit www.insidestrategicrelations.com. Go to the contact page and simply ask your questions. I'm Justin Hitt with the Inside Strategic Relations newsletter, where we help you transform business relationships into profits guaranteed.